In today's video, I will be giving you some tips and tricks on how you can create more realistic paper flowers using these Sizzix Thinlits dies from Tim Holtz. These are the small tattered floral dies, and I split them up into 3 different color categories. I have the 2 biggest with my lightest color, and then I'll get slightly darker with my 2 middle sizes, and then the 2 smallest dies of this flower will have the darker pink. When creating more realistic flowers, you want to pick really natural colors and colors that blend very easily together. So these 3 colors are very similar and they're all in the same color scheme, and they're just slightly different tones. After I get them cut out on my Sizzix Big Shot, I am separating them from the die using the Sizzix tweezers. And now, even though I'm using 3 different color papers, I want to add a little bit more color variance within each of these petals. In nature, no petal is the same solid color all the way through, so I am using some archival ink to dap on a little bit of different colors around the edges of my flower. You can also use watercolor. In a little I'll be using some distress crayons that are in the same color scheme. You can really use whatever just to mix up the color a little bit. Now I am going to go in with my distress crayon. This color is Victorian Velvet, and I am going to add a little bit into the centers of each of these and then draw some lines outwards. I like using the distress crayon for this because I can easily smudge it, and then I can also use a little bit of water to dab it out and make it a little bit smoother. This tool that I'm using is from the Shape and Style kit. It is actually the quilling tool, but it helps to have any type of tool with a fine point just to help hold down your petals as you draw on them. And you don't have to worry about your lines being perfect. It's just a little bit more definition and shading inside the center. This dauber that I'm currently using, I did wet a little bit. It is not super wet to make the whole paper wet, but enough just to kind of dab around the color. And another important tip is make sure whatever you do to one side of the flower, do it to the other. You don't know how much of the back side of these petals you'll be able to see, and if you when we curl it up, you will see the back side more. So like with when I was adding the ink on it, I also added the ink to the back side. And now I am using the Sizzix Distresser tool, and I'm going around each of these little petals and just roughing it up a little bit. Doing this makes the edges look a little bit thinner and a little bit less perfect, which often the die leaves you with a perfect cut flower, which isn't quite as natural. That's why this tool really comes in handy. You can really get into the small areas of your petals. I only do this with the outside 3 or 4 petals. Once we get to the inside last couple petals, it's so small where you can hardly tell. Now I am using more items from my Shape and Style kit. These are some stylus tools, and they come in 3 different sizes. I'm starting with the largest size, and I'm using it on the molding pad, which helps so we can roll up the edges of these petals. I am starting with the larger ball and then working my way down. Right now I'm using the quilling tool just to kind of put some lines down the center of each petal, and I will fold them together on the corners a little bit so they have a little bit more of a triangle rounded shape. And then after I've folded it a little bit, I am going over with this smaller ball and just really getting into the edges. And I will repeat the same process for all 6 of these petals. Now I'm going in with some Sizzix Express glue and just putting a very small dab of glue in the very center, making sure not to glue down all of the petals because I want them to be separated from each other. And now I'm going to continue the process of rounding my petals, shaping them more into the individual triangles, and then gluing them with just a small dot of glue onto the bigger petal. And that is our flower so far. Next I will be adding some flower stamens. These are also from Sizzix, and they are in colors of pink, purple, rose, and violet. I am cutting off 5 little pieces that I'm going to individually glue into the center of this flower. For this, I thought it would be easier if I used a thicker glue. This is some quick hold, and it's a lot thicker than the express glue, but I think you could also make this work with the express glue. I just chose to use the quick hold because it's thicker, and I figured I could just drop in the stamens and they would just stay in place. And it did work pretty well. Because these little pieces that we're gluing in are so small, it may be helpful to use the tweezers to help you drop them in and hold them in place as they dry. Now I am using my tweezers to help them stand up a little bit straighter as they start to dry. This glue does dry very fast, so that is helpful with helping them stand up. And then I'm going around and loosening up those petals that may have gotten squished down a little bit while we were gluing. And after you finish plumping it up, you could just leave it there, but I went in and I added some Sizzix sparkle dust. I kind of think it could be like pollen or just a little bit added accents on the flowers. So I'm going around and adding a little bit of glue on some of the edges of the flowers and a little bit in the very center. I think the trick with this part is to not add too much glue where there will just be so much glitter and it'll be really sparkly, but just enough to kind of accent it. Also, I really like this powder glitter. It's not super glittery and super shiny. It's mostly a matte powder with just a few hints of the sparkle. And now I'm just going around, and if there was too big of a glue drop, I'm wiping it off before it dries. And after I finish this step, my paper flower is complete. Thank you so much for watching, and you can buy all of these materials I used today at thecherryontop.com.